Welcome to HortTube. My name is Putnam. This is the weekly landscape update video that I do each week here in Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B. This is a landscape project that's been going on for a couple years at this point, if you want to go back and catch up with where I'm at. Interesting little time here the first week in May in the garden here in Raleigh, North Carolina, is a lot of the early flowering shrubs have finished. The flowering bulbs, for the most part, are done, except for I have quite a few alliums that are blooming at this point. And we're waiting for summer shrubs to be flowering, and I'm switching out from pansies to summer annuals, and so a lot going on, but not as much blooming as there was 2 or 3 weeks ago. But coming up in the next 2 or 3 weeks from now, this place is just going to be absolutely lit up. Got a lot of shrubs in front of me that are going on some landscape projects. I'm receiving a lot of things now for 3 big landscape projects that you guys will see pretty soon. Great looking pieces. I mentioned a Philadelphus in Sunday's Q&A video that I want to show you over here, and I mistakenly called it Pearls of Perfection, but it's actually Pearls of Perfume. That one's a very new release. You see the double flowers on it. Very fragrant. Great shape. I got that plant last year and it was only maybe 8 inches tall in a 1-gallon container. It's a tiny plant. It's grown that much in a season and just looks great. And it has a tendency to bloom well into summer rather than blooming all out at one time. One request I got from last week's video, I have already planted my hibiscus along the edge of the property, and there's quite a few of them out here that I plant them all along. I plant those all along the edge. They were done from seed in the house. They'll have that purple foliage all summer. Last year, they probably will reach 10 feet high within about 8 or 9 weeks from now. And you will not believe how drought tolerant those things are. They literally get planted in the ground. And I think they were watered 2 times last year total, they've only been watered in once, and it's been fairly dry. It just doesn't faze them at all. If Steph will take the camera down the line a bit. I never show this side of the property. We'll take a look at some blueberries. This is a blueberry that was done at the University of Florida, and it's a southern high bush variety, and it blooms kind of early, and last year definitely got away with that. Didn't have a late frost. This year we had that freeze in March. It still got a decent amount of blueberries on it, surprisingly. I thought it would have done in all of them on that March 13th freeze, because this thing was in absolute full bloom. But I'm gonna get a few berries on it, but that's the thing about having blueberries that are timed properly for your area. This is definitely one that but blueberries need to bloom a little later than early March for me in order to ensure that a late frost isn't gonna hurt them. I've put up a couple annual planting videos over the last week and a half or so, just showing some of the combos in the landscape. There's one more coming, and it will include the replanting of what we call the swoosh here in the front garden space, and I'll go through the plants that were put into this and a couple other annual plantings that have happened over the last week. This season, I'm calling the season of the corners. When you're doing a large project like this, you tend to push everything out to the corners. And so you guys get this beautiful view of the landscape from, angles that I'm choosing to show you. But, there's been corners where things have been piled, projects have been, backed up and that kind of thing. Finally this year, getting out to the corners. And this front street area is finally is one of those spaces that I've never really shown off all that much, but the fence went in last year. Some of the perennials, which were very small when they went in, some from seed that were done here at the house, are finally really starting to show off. There's a couple more shrubs going in out here so that in the next couple weeks, so that it has some winter interest as well. So excited about that, just making it out to the corners. And the hidden spaces. The Empress of China dogwood, which I showed maybe 2 weeks ago, with very small flowers on it. The bracts are starting to get a little larger. They're starting to develop a little bit of that white color. But you can see on one of these stems that there's probably as many as 200 flowers on each individual branch, which is, just really, it's really gonna be super impressive. But we're probably another 2 weeks away from that, it looks like at this point. So early on in a project like this, a lot of the shrubs that go in are very small, and they're spaced apart, and it doesn't create that full layered look that you're going for. And so it takes a little while. Finally, the shrubs are going to play a role in this landscape this year. The last year, I kind of overcame the fact that all the shrubs were, small with all the annual plantings. And so everybody said, oh, it's so beautiful because it's so colorful. It's going to be just as colorful this year, but in the background of this, things like these camellias are putting on a tremendous amount of growth. The spirea that's in front of me, the Shasta viburnum that's here, all of the shrubbery in the landscape is now playing a role in what should be a beautiful summer display out here. As I said, all the early flowering bulbs, the daffodils, tulips, hyacinths, those kinds of things have finished at this point, but it is allium season right now, and I think I have 5 varieties that are up and in full bloom at this point. Also had someone ask last week about the Edgeworthia, and it is leafed out beautifully. They were just asking if mine had leafed out, and yes, it has. This was a very small container plant last year. I think it was early last year when it actually went in the ground, because it had a couple, I think it had 2 or 3 flowers on it when it went in. It was literally this big, and so very, very quickly it has put on some rapid growth. It seems to be loving this spot. Since last week's tour video, a lot of the summer vegetables have gone in. The cool season vegetables still look fantastic here, but summer vegetables have been planted right into the middle of them, directly in front of the camera. Some of the seedling dahlias have been filled in to a complete, what amounts to an area where dahlias wrap completely around this vegetable garden area. I've added wood chips down the middle of the aisles, not directly on the tomato plants, but through the middle of the aisles. They'll break down and become compost. They'll help the soil later, but they'll also keep down some of the weed pressure during the growing season. It's just a ton of stuff has gone in. Herbs are going in. A few more herbs are going in along that line over there. Potatoes look great. And behind me is that entire row of hibiscus on the other side of this fence. And if you followed last year, they'll end up being this tall. This back, where I'm standing right now, will just have a purple backdrop in about 6 or 8 weeks. It's amazing how fast these things actually grow. I have several Salvia officinalis in the landscape, which is a fantastic culinary herb, but it's also a beautiful flowering plant as well. And I've got some hummingbird action out here right now, and I'm sure that's near the top of their list. This is a heucherella called Tapestry. This is in the Southern Living Plant Collection. I really, really like this plant. It's a combo of our 2 natives, Tiarella and Heuchera, and the beautiful pink flowers sitting up on top of this thing in the spring. And then that foliage will actually it's coming out a little bit lighter colored with a dark center. That dark center becomes a little more pronounced as the season goes on. So there's a hosta directly in front of the camera. I'm going to go through the list of hosta in the landscape next week. I've got a lot of really interesting newer varieties out here, and they're all in the process of waking up. Some are farther along than that one, but I'll go through the list of them next week. Behind it is a distilleum. That one's called Jewel Box, and a lot of people have been concerned about the damage that their distilleum took in zone 7 and probably down into 8A. But that one's leafing back out already, and I think I'm a week or 2 away from it looking like it never happened, honestly. At this point, this Brigadoon St. John's wort continues to be a standout in the landscape. It's in this space that it's in, it's the understory for some other shrubs that are back here, but it is getting some direct sun, middle day, but not all day. So about 3 hours of direct sun. The rest of the day it's in dappled sunlight. These were cut back hard in the wintertime. I showed that in a video. You can actually run a lawnmower across the top of these, or a weed eater, or whatever you want to do. But by doing that, I've got all fresh foliage coming out, and it'll look like this the rest of the summer. It does get it gets a yellow flower, which the yellow flower doesn't stand out all that well, but it is great for pollinators. I got a question last week about how my Fatsia is doing, and it's doing great. There was a cover on this that night of that March 13th freeze that had the wind. Wasn't so much worried about the 23 degrees that we had that night, but I knew the combo with the wind probably wouldn't go over very well with this Fatsia because it's marginally hardy even where I'm at here in zone 7B, but it's looking great. I had a little bit there's a leaf or 2 here or there that did get nipped that night, but for the most part it's looking good and it's starting to put on new growth already. Another one that was asked about was my spider's web Fatsia. The Fatsia we just saw was a combination of ivy and Fatsia, this plant here. And that is like a climbing, it's like a climbing Fatsia, but it takes out the aggression of the ivy. And then this is Fatsia japonica. This just becomes a big shrub. This is a variegated form of it, again called spider's web. And I planted this thing in November, year before last, so 2 Novembers ago, which was like the worst month to plant a marginally hardy plant in your area. You know, and of course it got stung last winter and it didn't grow a whole lot last season. But look what it's already done this year. I think this thing will probably be 3 by 3 or more. Interestingly, it has a few deformed leaves on it as they're opening up. So I think back in March when we had that weird cold event, I think where the new growth was just starting, it got burned a bit, and it, you know, it's created some strange looking leaves. The newer leaves on it look completely normal, but the initial ones that came out, a little strange looking, but they're also interesting as well. One of the annual videos was the annual planting here along the back turf, and I've left those pansies in place directly behind it. There is a sun perennial planting video coming up and a shade perennial planting video coming up. Got lots of perennials for both, and so I'll cover a lot of those that are going in. The sun perennials are going to go behind this annual border. Shade perennials are going to go mostly back here behind me, but also some under the neighbor's maple tree in the front garden space as well. Again, you can see the shrubs and trees and things back here starting to have an impact in this landscape, which is exciting for me because this is the look that I was going for, is to have a layered shrub and small tree backdrop to all of these flowering perennials and flowering annuals. And so, whereas again, last year it was all about the color and to distract from the small shrubbery, this year the shrubs are going to add to the landscape. So I'm excited about that. So thank you guys for following along. Again, I'm doing one of these tour videos each week, and there's several more things that should be in flower or interesting next week. Thanks for watching.